And we're live. Welcome to the Global Survivor Show, brought to you by Reality Pop. We've got a very special panel of guests here today, and we're going to talk about why International Survivor is something that you should watch if you haven't actually seen it before. So I do want to give people that have jumped into the stream the ability to jump out in the next 3 seconds, because we may spoil a little bit of what happens in Survivor Island of Secrets Season 7, since we've got a former player here with us. So I'm going to count down to three. 3, 2, 1. You've been warned. So I'm going to go into welcoming everybody, and we'll start off with our special guest, Rob Bentele from Survivor South Africa, Island of Secrets, the winner of that season, and also the current record holder of the most individual immunity idols or challenges won within the South African season. So, Rob, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. Amazing introduction. But yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. Very good.
Great. It's great to have you here. Now, we've also got with us today our creative director, Adam Jumba, aka my boss, and a fellow super fan of the US Survivor show. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's 8 a.m. where I am, so I'm a little on the tired end, but I was excited to do this podcast, so it's woken me up a good bit. I'm kind of playing the role, I think, of most people that'll be watching this stream who haven't seen the international Survivor world. So I'm kind of playing the role of the audience a little bit here. I definitely have plans to watch all the international seasons, but I'm hoping this panel will kind of give even more of a jump to that. So I'm excited to talk about it and kind of hear what I'm missing out on.
I'm very confident we've got a great panel here to convince you to watch some of the shows. So lastly, but not least, we've got Chantel Francis, who you may know from doing some podcasts on our app and also some in regards to the challenge. And more recently, she'll be doing our Big Brother Canada coverage, which I believe will start from tomorrow onwards. Chantel, how are you doing?
I'm equally as tired over here. 8 a.m., pandemic life. Don't really go to sleep before 3 or 4 a.m. So I'm happy to be here, but I'm also happy that I have a tea. So we'll do the tea, and I will drink the tea and hopefully open my eyes.
Brilliant. Now, I will also just mention I'm from Auckland, New Zealand, but originally from South Africa. So I've lived in Auckland for the last 13 years, and it's 2 a.m. in the morning over here. So we've all got different time zones that we're jumping on this call. And I think, Rob, you're probably the one that's got the most normal schedule doing this at 3 p.m. on your time. Rob, I am going to jump off and I want to touch off and find out from you, how's things been going since you've won the show, since we've seen you on the show? What have you been up to?
So look, winning Survivor is I'm a guy from a very small town. Funny enough, I'm actually at home now. I just landed last night with my parents. I just came to visit them I had about 2-3 days of like chill time. So I decided to come here. They're having a little bit of my mom runs comrades and stuff, and she's having a bit of a prize giving with her friends out there. So please excuse the noise. Yeah.
She's an athlete, by the way. I was going to say, if you ever were to do the amazing race in South Africa, if it ever existed, I know it doesn't exist yet, you should take your mother with you, because she was an absolute legend in your season, helping you win that challenge for the loved ones.
Yeah, no, physical beast. But right now she's with her friends making noise outside. So yeah, look, no. So winning Survivor, it's for someone like me who's never ever been in the public eye. It was a bit much, to be honest. Like, I'm not used to that kind of. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, especially with the winning and the way I won and stuff. But I mean, nothing but grateful, definitely gratitude. But I didn't know how to handle it. Honestly, I didn't know how to cope. I very quickly moved to Joburg, where I still currently reside, working with a couple of brands, obviously, and going forward, I was more interested in business. So I sort of stepped sideways out of the entertainment space and pursued business. And that's where I am. But I am looking at doing a sort of comeback this year. I'm ready to. I think I've acclimatized to this new lifestyle, because I ran away, honestly, at first. I couldn't do it.
And it's something that we hear very common, to be honest. I'm pretty sure Adam would be able to add something here, because Adam has spoken to, as part of the 100 US survivors in the top 100, he spoke to a lot of US survivors. And I don't know, Adam, if you've got some insights in regards to how people find the fame when they first play Survivor and if they're successful, but I know you've spoken to a lot. So it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that. You're on mute, Adam. Let me just
Yeah, it's definitely tough. I mean, when I did the top 100 interviews, usually the type of questions I was asking those guys, particularly pertain to their time on the show. So I didn't get to talk too much to those guys about kind of their life since. But in the instances where I did, I sort of heard some similarities to what Rob had just said. I think a lot of them, had never really been in the public eye in any way, shape, or form before, and then all of a sudden, as soon as they, return, or they can sort of come back out of public, because they kind of have to sequester after coming on the show, at least in the U.S., until all the episodes air. I think a lot of them found it kind of challenging, going to the grocery store, going to an airport, just going to the post office, wherever it be, just kind of everywhere they go, having someone recognize them. It's a very different shift. And I don't think anyone can really become accustomed to that right away. I think some people, I think, gradually, got a bit used to it over time. I think obviously, we don't have to go too deep into it, but I think there's obviously some clear U.S. cases of people's lives changing pretty heavily, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, coming off of Survivor as well as other reality shows. So it depends on the person, obviously. But I don't think anyone's live. I don't think any former U.S. contestant could say their life is, completely the same coming off of Survivor, whether they're a winner or came in last place. So.
Yeah, and I think that we as the super fans, the ones that actually podcast about the show, we know how crazy Survivor fans are. Like, I mean, we're still talking about, the Legs and Boston Rob betrayal that happened in season 6. That's years ago, but we still talk about that. So, and I think the interesting thing for a country like South Africa, where Rob is from, the country is so much smaller compared to the US. So, imagine, in the US, you've got 300 million plus people. In South Africa, you've got 50 million or maybe now close to 60 million people. So for Rob walking around, it would be very similar, I think, to how it would have been for people winning the show in those first 2 or 3 seasons in the US, where 20 or 30 million people watch the show. It's that same level of almost fame that you get from it. Rob, one of the things that I did as part of my sort of homework to get ready for this podcast and to talk to you is I listened to some of the other interviews that you had with other people, because I didn't want to be, I don't want you to repeat yourself in a lot of the things that were asked before, And one of the things that stood out for me is that you weren't what I would call a big fan of Survivor beforehand, because you watched 2 seasons that you mentioned. You watched the Borneo one and you watched the All-Stars one, which Boston Rob played in. Did you go back and watch more seasons since you've come off the show, or have you completely tried to just detox from Survivor for a bit?
Look, so I watched it when I was younger. I think it was in the early 2000s when it first started. The first early seasons, I think One Way Rich won. So as a kid, I was very inspired. I was like, wow, so cool. And then there was the season with obviously Rob and Amber. I watched that, and that one was just beautiful. I love how it ended with them together, and it was like a perfect fairy tale. But then I really lost track with Survivor for many years. And then it rebooted itself in South Africa roughly 2000 and I'd say 2012, if I'm not mistaken. We did like a season 5 champions, very good, high production quality, amazing. I watched that one, and then I watched season 6 of South Africa Philippines. That was also roughly, I think, 2015, if I'm not mistaken, 2016 maybe. But then that really reignited that flame. And that is all the Survivor I had to watch. I think the problem is that if you watch the game too much, take for example a player like Jacques. Jacques is a student of the game. He's seen every season, every episode of everything. He knows exactly how bad it can get inside that world. I was a bit ignorant, and ignorance is bliss. I wasn't afraid of any one of the tribal councils. People who watch it too much overthink it, because they replay all the bad shit they've seen in all these seasons, and they think it's going to happen to me today. It didn't happen to me, because so I think Survivor paranoia is something very good, something very powerful that you need to try and avoid. And the best way to avoid it is don't watch it too much. I think I knew enough how the game works, but I didn't know how bad it can actually get in that universe. But now, obviously,
so what you're saying is that So what you're saying is that if myself or Adam, if we played the game, we're doomed because we'll be overthinking every little thing. But I appreciate what you're saying because we've seen it in the US as well. Like we've seen superfans play in the US, and I think a lot of us are very aware that you can overthink. And it's funny you bring Jark up. I wasn't going to talk about Jark until a lot later in the actual podcast, but he's one of the players that I think if there's a second season for him to come and play, I think he will do a lot better in a second season compared to that first season because he made early mistakes, and then when he came back or he tried to work his way back into the game, it just didn't fall in place for him because of the fact that he overplayed his hand so early. So I think someone like him who's been there once now, I think if he comes back a second time, how do you think he would do if he were to play the game again? Do you think he could get outside of his own mind, or do you think it'll be more of the same old?
I'm sorry, I didn't even hear the question probably because I'm busy trying to shout at these people.
That's okay. That's 100% fine.
Clearly this time.
No, so I was just going to say, you brought Jark up, which I think is interesting. I
Jark,
wasn't going to talk about him. And one of the things, I think we might as well go into one of the main reasons for why I want people to watch International Survivor, which is casting. I think that the casting of Survivor International, and not taking anything away from the US, that's brilliant as well. But I think in recent seasons, it's been great to see people from other parts of the world, different cultures, play the same game, and to see what would they do in the same situation as US players. Now, South Africa is quite unique, because a lot of people don't know we've got 12 official languages. We've got a lot of diversity in South Africa, which I think is great for the cast because we see a lot of diversity. When we see those times where you guys are talking in your native tongue, like I know you're Zulu, you've got people there who's speaking Afrikaans. There's different languages, so the international viewers just see the English translation, but they don't realize there's that many different languages all coming together in one. What do you think makes South African players in Survivor great to watch? Like, do you have any sort of opinions or thinking about that?
Yeah, look, I think what's most beautiful about us is just how culturally diverse we are. We are so different in many ways, and I'm blessed to have been able to touch on those different cultures, from different backgrounds, ethnicities, and bringing that together becomes a melting pot that is quite interesting to watch. Really is. I'm very happy with this new season that's coming out, though, because obviously I've got a bit of behind-the-scenes knowledge on it as well. And I can say it's going to be far more culturally diverse as well. Very young, beautiful people on there because they couldn't cast anyone older than 45, I think, because of COVID. They wanted to be safe with that. But yeah, I think ours is very different to any other one, just simply because of how diverse this country is. You would know, being from here, Chris, what it's like. You got your black, white, colored Indians, and it's the melting pot of the entire world brought into one. It's lovely.
And we've all got our own thing that we love. But I mean, the one thing we can all be united on is our braai, having a good barbecue, having the meat. And that's why it's no braai. So seeing those reward challenges, which was great, where you guys were enjoying the steers. Foreigners don't get it. They don't understand the steers, the hunger, the withdrawal from not having had that steers for so long. And it's one of my favorite food chains as well. But one question I still wanted to ask you before I'm going to go over to Chantal to give us a little bit of insights on the Australian casting, because we do want to touch on both Australian Survivor and South African Survivors. I mentioned Jark there, and you mentioned that Jark was one of those players who were overthinking a lot in the game and potentially overplayed because he saw so many different situations. Me personally, I loved the fighting spirit of Jark throughout the season. The fact that he was playing from the bottom and he was throwing different things at you guys. The one where he pretended he was going to play the idol and then just zipped up closed his gloves with the idol being in there. Some brilliant tribal councils. He gives good tribal councils. How do you think he would do if he was to play for a second time? Do you think he'll be more out of his head now that he's been there once before? Or do you think it's just in Jark's nature he's not going to be able to change that about his game?
No, look, I must start by saying I've got tremendous respect for Jacques. That guy put up the best fight for me than anyone else on that island. When I can say that it took me, 3 tribal councils to get rid of him, actively pursuing to say, Jacques, I need him out. Because I could see how well he knows the game. It was dangerous. It was scary. The guy can find islands like this. He smells them. And so I have nothing but tremendous respect for him. He played phenomenally, but you did see survivor paranoia when he burned that first idol. And the problem was that he also burned his what I call social capital in Survivor. Everyone has a sort of social capital, and the moment they do something as weird as that on the second episode or third, whatever it was, people's not trusting you, and now they even want to start distancing themselves from you. So to bounce back from that and go as far as he went, it's a testament to how well he plays the game. I think if he was to play again next time, he would be far more lethal, even be far worse. I always chose my targets, or who I wanted to go home, depending on their threat level to me. And Jacques was always very high up there, but he deliberately went under. Remember, he even said it just before merge that he's going to sort of disappear for a bit. So he lowered his threat level, but then the second he came back and started playing actively again, I could see him, getting people together, all that kind of stuff. He obviously raised his threat level. And as soon as it raised, he was still able to defend himself when I pretty much had the whole tribe against him. So phenomenal player. I think if he played again, he would be even far more dangerous. Nothing but respect.
We'll touch on a little bit later on who we'd like to see come back, but I wanted to get that question in there because you brought his name up. But we're going to go over to Chantel now. And Chantel, I want to ask you, as someone who's watched all the Australian International Survivor seasons, what is it about Australian Survivor cast members that sort of makes them quite unique and fun to watch on a show like Survivor?
Two reasons. I'm not sure if they're all tropes and stereotypes within Australia or even South Africa, but I'm not familiar with them. So it's not like, oh, there's the fireman or the family guy. Like I can't put them into categories specifically. And so it allows me to really get to know these players in a deeper, I'm more intrigued by their stories because I've just never seen it before. So I'm already engaged in learning more about each of these characters. And I find that more so for Australian Survivor, that they cast gamers. So this goes against your point right now, Rob. I do feel as though a lot of people that watch the Australian Survivor seasons are on them and playing. They are big fans. They're super fans, and they're all go in there to play. And so I think I like that element of not knowing their stereotype and then also seeing people play and know the game really well. I think it's really fun.
Yeah, I think one of the things for Australian Survivor that sort of stands out for me is that many people might not know this, but Channel 10 has been bought out by CBS over in America, and the same production team that actually does a lot of the shooting of Survivor US now also helps out with the whole production, the editing, and all of that side of things for the Australian Survivor show. And I think that if you look at it from that way, the characters on the Australian Survivor, they become like your coaches because they've got the Godfather over there, they've got the Godmother, they like to give themselves these nicknames. They've got the Golden God, they've got the Boss Man, the Creep, they've got all these different names that are coming out, which makes for a fun dynamic. But I think one of the things, and I think Rob might be, I don't know how big of a rugby fan he is, but in rugby, South Africa and Australia has got this rivalry similar to New Zealand where I live. It makes for some confusing games over here sometimes, Rob. That's when I'm still a South African because I still support the Springboks. But when got it. It's where I was born, and I still have all my family living there. But I guess the big thing for me when it comes to Australian survivors is Australians by nature, they're people that play very hard. They're very competitive on the sports field, but they always have time to slow down and make a joke and have fun. And I feel like there's a lot more of the jokey, fun moments that you see in Survivor Australia and people getting up to shenanigans. Yes, they are game players as well and all those kind of things, but that makes for a lot of fun, I think. And one of the things that the Australian season does extremely interesting for me, and Chantel, you'll find this interesting, their edit of the casts are very different because when they go onto the show and they play, you see videos being shot from them being at home and what life is like at home for them. So you get to know them on that personal level as well, so that when one of them get blindsided, man, I'm not a guy that cries very often, but it makes you emotional on some of these things because you really start investing in these people. You know who they are outside of the game, and I think that's very interesting. It's kind of like Big Brother, when they come in the beginning, they've got the package from home, but imagine having that throughout the season, and at certain times they show you these things like what certain people have been getting up to. Rob, have you seen any of the Australian Survivor seasons, or have you not had the opportunity yet?
I love it. I watched the last 2 seasons solely because of David. That man can play Survivor like nothing I've ever seen before. Honestly, my head comes off to him. It started with the first season he was in, when he calls him the horse, that big guy. And he makes a fake idol, gives it to him. I mean, I just couldn't believe the braveness to actually
that was good.
He got away with it. And he got away with it for days. And I was just like, this man is just such an asshole. He's actually fun to watch. That's what I love about him. He's just
Yeah,
bluntly himself. He's just the way he is. You couldn't give two shits whether you like him or not. And I think that is
big
that is
characters, right?
amazing character. A lot of them, and it's not just him. I mean, was that other guy as
Yeah.
well? Who was always in his speedo, running around. I forget his name and stuff like that. Great characters,
Yeah.
amazing
Are you
casting.
talking about you're talking about I forgot his name, the mullet, the guy with the mullet and moustache.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, guys, it's absolutely legendary. In my opinion, I honestly just put Australian Survivor there at the top. Honestly, beautiful editing, castaways.
But I do
gameplay.
want to defend your season slightly here, Rob, as well, because I know you can't do that yourself as being the person who's won it and who was extremely in it. Chantel mentioned there isn't as many game players. I do think in your season there was a lot of game players, but I think you absolutely trampled on them and you didn't give them the opportunity to even get started. And one of the things for me that's very interesting is, like, if I watch the show, the people that I think were big fans of the show, they just didn't get the opportunity were Merrill, someone like Mike Fenter, someone like a Jark. I've had the feeling like Jeffrey, like he was somewhat of a fan as well. I'm not sure. It wasn't displayed on the show, but those are the people that I think were big fans that I could see on the show. And, and for me, the interesting thing was, I think for me, when I watched your show, where you really took off is when you took Rocco off. That, when you took him out, you realized how much power you had in the game and how you could mentally manipulate and control people to do what you want them to do. And I think from there onwards, you started really growing into it. And for the very big difference between your game and like a Dave's game is the fact that you were a slow burner in the beginning and you really played slow for those first couple of ones until the Rocco vote where you really started taking off. But your game gained more and more momentum as you continue to go throughout it. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but I've mentioned this to Adam. If all the versions of Survivor, US, international, all inclusive, I don't know if you're aware of this, there's some fans that put you in the top 3 of all-time winners in US, international. You're above David on their list.
Amazing. No, it's an honor. Can't believe it. Yeah, but I've heard it from Shannon Gates as well. I have heard it with Shannon Gates and
because what makes your case so interesting to me is that you're very much an old school player in the sense that, you had the idol, but you were given the idol and you kept it when Paul left, obviously. And you knew how to work with idols. You always had the information of who had idols at what time. But what you did extremely well and what will make you a threat if you were ever to come back is your social game, because your social game were absolutely through the roof. I mean, you had people that weren't in your tribe working for you. It's kind of like if you go and play soccer and you've got the ref on your side as well, because the ref being Doral, from the other side helping you out with things, because you were just that good and you were really good at the social game. So I think in that sense, definitely casting wise, I think we've got very strong casts in both, but I do think South African Survivor can still learn a little bit from how Australia Survivor edit those little packets of people's lives outside of the game. I think if they bring that in, it gives people that extra insight into them. Now, Adam, I know you've been patiently waiting here, and this is one of the things I wanted to ask you specifically is, what's the sort of things that you normally look for in a cast of Survivor? What makes a good cast for you in a season, and what would make you want to watch a season of Survivor?
Yeah, so I can't really speak on how they cast some of the international survivors, but as far as how they cast U.S. Survivor, they definitely since season 1 just go all out with trying to, I think, capture different stereotypes, as well as trying to really make sure they get people from all over. Maybe not so much recently. It seems like they've kind of been hitting like the major city pockets of America, like your LA, your Chicago, your New York players, with like a couple of small town people scattered throughout. But for most of the show's history, they definitely did try to get people from all over, especially towards those first like couple seasons. But I think what's interesting with Survivor, and I don't know if this was intentional with Borneo, but I think what worked so well with Borneo wasn't the different players themselves and seeing people from all over the country individually. It was more seeing how they interacted with each other. It was seeing how I forget where Rudy is from. I think he might be a Long Island guy, but it was interesting seeing how someone like Rudy interacted with someone like Hatch, or seeing how like Sue, the truck driver from Minnesota or somewhere in the Midwest that she's from, interacted with Wigglesworth, who was like the young, hip, like young, like early 20s girl who was, a paddle instructor, like still kind of figuring out what she wanted to be, kind of still figuring out herself. Whereas Sue was like this very tough, hard nosed, like knew exactly what she wanted, had her life pretty set at that point. So I think with the U.S. Survivor, with casting, what's interesting is seeing how these different walks of life, because the country is so big, not only in population, but in you have in the U.S. alone, you have your desert area, you have your mountainous regions, you have your cold winter areas, you have your two different coasts, you have the swamplands. It's a very different geographical place that allows for a lot of different, I guess, types of people and different walks of life to develop. So what was so great about Borneo, I think, wasn't just that they were able to bring in people from all different walks of life, but seeing how those different walks of life interacted with each other, I think, was exciting. So I think they've tried to continue that ever since, and I think it's worked. I think it's one of the best parts of US.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, and even if we look at the international Survivor season, there's always certain players that are just going to clash heads, and I think that's one of the things for South African Survivor. I'll add there as well, is that we've got so many strong personalities in Survivor South Africa, and that is due to the fact that in South Africa nothing comes easy, and a lot of people there have to fight for everything that they've got. We see ourselves as a very little country. We're not a first world powerhouse like the US or like a Canada, for instance, where Chantel's from, and that. So we have to fight for everything that we have. So you get these people that are used to fighting for their little patch of something, and you put them in Survivor, and they're going to have very strong and different opinions. So like for Rob, you had definitely like a Rocco that would have been someone that would have gone against you, why you needed to take him out. But the biggest person that went up against you throughout the season and that made for, I think, the most interesting TV for me was Dante. That clash between you and Dante throughout, until you actually got the better of him and got him out. That was magnificent TV, and you guys come from very different walks of life as well, and I think that's what makes for a really good show. Yourself and Dante, are you guys good now? Do you talk, or have you squashed it after the show?
No, funny enough, Dante and I get along very well after the show. Just his closing remark, when he wrote my name, I wouldn't feel right going home without voting for the greatest survivor amongst us. I mean, that just shows so much strength in him to actually say that, after how we played against each other and stuff. But I think he's mature enough not to know it was a game. It wasn't personal. In fact, Dante was like that guy telling everyone about Armageddon's coming, and no one listened to him, and they were laughing at him, saying that he's crazy. And then, sure enough, Armageddon came, and he was sitting on the jury and he was laughing at everyone left back inside.
That was brilliant.
I like things like that, because the one criticism that I do have for my seasons, as you said it earlier, Chris, is that I didn't give people a chance. The second I saw a problem, I eliminated it, and it made it a bit too predictable, which is boring. We always like to see big blindsides, but I didn't allow that to happen. I would actually, you obviously didn't air it because it would be boring, but I'd actually, before every tribal council from merge, they would ask me, what do the vote structure looks like tonight? And I told them word for word who will vote for who, not just within my lines, but within the other lines. And I was right every single time. I think it was only twice where I was maybe off by 1 or 2 votes. But in general, I knew exactly what the vote structure looked like everyone. But it's boring,
But I want to add to this, Rob. I want to add to this, mate. You won R1 million. It's all about winning the Benjamins. It's not about, making for a great show. And whenever we look at the best of the best, the two players that were on top of yourself, like on the list that I saw of who's the best to ever play the game, was number 1, Kim Spradling, which she played in One World and played a very boring game to me personally, but definitely one of the most dominating games. And then Boston Rob for Redemption, but he did that on his 4th season going out, where you did that on your 1st season. So in my mind, you're even above that, but and then you come in on 3rd there. So I think that yes, maybe it made the season a bit predictable, but it definitely puts you up there amongst the greats in regards to being able to get to the end and win it comfortably. So definitely don't feel guilty energy about that. And Survivor South Africa got picked up for another season, and it was still one of the most popular seasons. And you were voted the fans' favorite player of the season. So if they didn't like the fact that you dominated that way, that wouldn't have happened. So you should take a lot of solace in knowing that. Now, I do want to move into the next thing here, because we did touch upon the cast a lot, but I believe that casting is probably the most important thing to a Survivor season, because if you don't have a good cast, you're just not going to have a good season, let's be honest. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to bring up, and it's going to be controversial for those people who love the US show, and I'm not bringing this up from a place of malice. I love Jeff Probst. I think, the show wouldn't have been there for 40 seasons if Jeff Probst wasn't around, and we should respect that, the fact that he could make a show that people still want to watch 20 years later. But one of the things I think that's really, really good is that in International Survivor, we're proving that different hosts can host Survivor and it can be successful. Adam, how real is the fear over in the US that Survivor will come to an end when Jeff decides to retire and maybe like the next 10 seasons or so? Is that a big fear over there? And how will it affect the casual fans versus the super fans? Because I think there's a difference between those two as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think for the longest time that fear wasn't there. I think a lot of people thought, no way is this guy going to do 5 more seasons. No way is he going to do 5 more. And he just keeps coming back and keeps coming back. No complaints, of course. But I think over the last maybe 5-6 years, I think that fear has definitely come. At least I've noticed it. I don't I want to speak for everyone, but personally, yes, I do think Jeff leaving the show could potentially be the end of the show itself. Especially because he's kind of taken like not only an executive producer, but almost kind of like taken the reins as the showrunner type role. So, for those who don't know, Jeff kind of has like the last say in the challenges. He has final say on like who's going to get casted, on what like the twist of the season is, on returning players. Like Jeff kind of is that last filter that all Survivor decisions have to go through. So if you add that element to it, I think there definitely is that fear that if Jeff leaves, it could potentially signal the end of the show. Of course, I think I hope that's not the case. I think what would make, I guess we'll call them like the purists of the show, like the diehard fans. I think the thing that would make them the most happy about Jeff leaving is if a former contestant themselves actually came back and kind of took over the reins from Jeff, which I don't think will be too hard. One, because there's especially in the last 5 or 10 years when we've kind of adapted to this digital age of Survivors sort of staying relevant through social media. And of course, you see former Survivor players now at podcasts and are on Twitch, or Tyson Rob Tyson has sort of entered the world of pickleball stardom. So they're sort of finding outlets to remain relevant, upon their exit of the show. But so I think that's the first reason that we could find a former contestant. I think the second is there's just so many great options. Like, of course, you have Rob, who's sort of become a personality in himself with creating RHAP. There's a whole laundry list, I think, of potentials. So the fear is there, but I think there's a fail safe if. I don't know if the more casual watch a season here and there fans would mind it too much, but the diehards, the purists, the super fans, I think would definitely it would hit home if Jeff left. But I think a former contestant sort of taking the reins would cushion the blow quite a bit. But it's interesting, 40 seasons.
Again, yeah, 40 seasons, he's casted a very massive shadow over whoever else is going to come into that show and sort of do the hosting role. But, I think we can take a little bit of solace in the fact that International Survivor have got 2 very successful hosts, in my opinion. Australian Survivor's got Jonathan, South Africa's Survivor's got Nico, who I both think are very good. And there's some similarities and there's certain things that they do that they learned from Jeff, and they have got some of the same catchphrases, but I also think they bring a little bit of their own flavor to the show, which is really, really good. And Chantal, it's been a while since I've come over to you, but I want to ask you a little bit about Jonathan. What do you think of Jonathan as a host for Australian Survivor? Do you like what he brings to the table, and what do you think are some of the strengths that he brings as a host?
I like him in the challenges. but I don't particularly enjoy him in the tribal councils. I find that they're a little bit too long. And I mean, it could just be that they're airing all of it on the Australian seasons. But I do feel that he kind of goes in and sometimes he gets the answer and he still goes in and asks more questions. And you're like, wait, they just gave you the answers. And so it kind of seems to blow up people's games kind of sometimes. And I would prefer to leave it a little bit more pure and let the game kind of evolve without, prodding questions that's going to kind of out some certain secrets or whatnot. So I know he's probably trying to get some good TV moments out of it or, have something be learned at tribal council, but I do find that he goes a little bit too deep into the questioning, and I think it takes away from the gameplay a little bit.
Interesting. So with Jonathan, how I sort of see him is when he first started, you could clearly tell he was out of his comfort zone in that first season that he sort of did, and he was sort of trying to find his feet, which I think is natural for any host. Because even if you look back at Jeff, in his first couple of seasons, I think Adam, we spoke about it not that long ago in the podcast. He hardly did anything. He hardly read the votes to people at the end and just said, "You're out. Bring me your torch." There was some very interesting dynamics happening there in the beginning, and it takes a couple of seasons because again, we're comparing him here to someone that's done 40 seasons and Jonathan himself has done 5 seasons. But sort of to go into the other side of it, I can see what you're saying. Some of the positives and the things that I like about Jonathan is I think he brings a lot of personality to the show. Again, that Australian flavor, something that really resonates with Australians is being able to joke and have fun with the cast, which he does all the time. He's got his bromances that sometimes happens on the show, and it can be quite funny between him and Luke Toki whenever Luke is playing. And I think that in general, he just seems to be a really nice, down-to-earth Australian bloke that is easy to identify with for Australians when they watch the show. I do think he's really good at asking questions and getting more information from people. I do think you're right. He probably does need to learn when it is perfect to stop and when not to give away too much information. And I think sort of segueing into Nico as a host, and definitely interested to hear Rob's thoughts on how Nico did, especially since he was on the season. And some of the things I noticed with Nico is that he also has that tendency of asking very relevant questions. And he does get very frustrated with players when they don't want to change the status quo. You can see him getting frustrated, but in my opinion, he never gives someone's game away. I didn't see him give anybody's game away. I just saw him wanting to make people think about their own place in the game, think about the logic that they're using before they go and vote for the night. But in some ways, he did blow up Sipe's game in your mind because he called someone a puppet master, which was actually going to be you, but you thought that it was Sipe, which he was referring to. Tell us a little bit about Nico and how it was playing the game with him and how you see him, especially in those tribals. I guess we'll start with the tribals since that's sort of a hot topic at the moment.
Yeah. No, look, with Nico, I think he's a great host because he's always been an original Survivor fan. He's one of the biggest Survivor fans I know, and he was like that long before he even ended up the host of Survivor South Africa. So he really came in with that intricate knowledge of the show. So, and he owns it very well. He's got his own sort of feel how he runs the whole set and how he presents himself, his personality, and all that stuff. But he did say something to me at the finale where he was like, "Rob, you know how hard it was sitting there and watching, knowing exactly what's going on here and trying to get it across to these people that guys play. Rob is literally sitting here, So yeah, he was phenomenal, and he did blow up CP's game, but not deliberately. I mean, I was a puppet master. I didn't even know it. I thought that it must be CP because it can't be me. Like, no, I'm not puppet. You don't realize where you're standing if you can't see, like, unless you're out of it. When you're in it, you can't see what's going on. You always think that maybe someone else is running something, doing
and I don't
something.
blame you.
Sorry?
I don't blame you because Sipe brought in some warriors to the merge. She had other people that she could have worked with,
Correct.
which wasn't you. And when she had those conversations with you about breaking up the amigos and having you there with Jark at the end, and from what I've heard in some of the interviews, she was having similar conversations with other people behind your back as well. I don't blame you for doing what you needed to do, and I think she's a phenomenal player. Another person that I wouldn't mind seeing play the game again. She just overplayed her hand slightly when she came up against you, and again, it's I don't know. Did she watch the game before, or was she also new to the game when she joined?
No, CPACE, actually her kids put her on the show. They're actually the ones who nominated her and did the whole video. But I mean, you see Nico's power again when it was for Nate's Tribal Council. Nate was literally supposed to go home that night. And then when Nico asked us the questions the way he did, he got us thinking to say, is all that's important to you guys his leg, you know? And he literally persuaded all of us without saying it directly. And the whole tribal council changed, and Paul went home that night.
And how and how involved is Nico behind the scenes when it comes to the production value of the show? Because obviously Jeff is very involved as an executive producer. Does Nico get involved behind the scenes a little bit and do anything around the production side of things, or is he predominantly just focusing on being the host behind the scenes?
Look, there's three people who I can say are Survivor South Africa in this country, and it is a man by the name Henry, a man by the name LaRue, and a man by the name Nico. I know he's involved behind the scenes as well. I just don't know to what degree. I haven't seen it personally myself, but I do know that he's very much involved behind the scenes as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned those three names. I haven't heard Henry before, but I've heard LaRue's name quite a few times before. I know LaRue, who is the creative producer for the show, he has gone on and have done podcasts with Shannon, and he's given back. He's done Reddit, and I know that Nico has been on Reddit, and they've answered questions about Survivor. They're super passionate about the game, and it shows, because when you look at Survivor South Africa, I think it is the closest form to what we see in the US for those early seasons of Survivor. If you look season 20 and before that, it gives you a lot of that nostalgia feel to it. They still have the intro with everybody's intro photos as the show start. There's still things like the auction there, reward challenges is big, and that segues into the next part of it, which is the challenges that we see in international. In US Survivor in recent times, they've actually moved away from showing us a lot of the reward challenges. But again, when we look at Australia and also South African Survivor, we see those things, and we see the different strategies that happens and people talking about the game at reward, and also how it can blow certain people's games up completely by going on a reward challenge. Like, for instance, Dante winning some of those rewards and taking it away from the very hungry amigos throughout the season, and it made him an even bigger target. If you're going to win and you're playing from the bottom like Dante did, why do you go out and win all the rewards? Go and win. I guess it's very difficult. If you're hungry, you're going to try and win it regardless, but you'd be better off to win the immunities instead of pissing off the main alliance against you, because you're not taking them with, even as one of the plus ones, or trying to ingratiate yourself with the enemy, which he didn't do. I think he didn't use those opportunities. Rob, as someone that played in Survivor South Africa, you're someone that's obviously physically very fit. I did listen to some of the podcasts that you mentioned. You didn't play a lot of sports when you were at school, but as you grow older, you try to get more into working out and becoming more fit. And you said that preparing for the show, you did a lot of work in regards to running and swimming and just a lot of more high intensity cardiovascular type of workouts. So I assume you did a lot of heavy lifting before that. But what do you think best prepares you to be able to go into a show like Survivor? Because you won a lot of challenges. You've got a lot of experience in winning a wide variety of different things. What is the key ingredients that you need to do well in challenges in Survivor South Africa?
My favorite word I've always said is balance. And I will never be the best or the strongest or the smartest or the best social game, all that, but it's encompassing all those aspects. So physically or on a spiritual level, it's mind, body, and soul for me. I work on all that before Survivor. I get my body in shape, I get my mind in the right mindset and soul. So I do a bit of spiritual work as well. Then I come into the game prepared in that manner. But when it comes to Survivor, there's a social game, there's a physical game, and there's a mental game. Be as balanced as you can with all of that. Don't focus solely on physical. That's actually the smallest part of the game, to be honest with you. The challenges, I believe, are one of the smallest parts. Look, Letitia almost got to the end, and she was not a physical person, It's a social game. That is what always comes first. And then mental, you need to not crack. Don't let your mind go into a negative space. You become what you think about. If you think about going home the whole time, you start missing home, you're going to manifest going home. That's how you're going to vote you out. So keep your mind in check. Those
So
people are
you
what
mentioned the
don't want.
word there, manifest, and you've said in the past that you almost a little bit of a yogi at one stage in life. How much do you think that sort of helped you in those challenges to stay calm and centered during the challenges? Because I feel like a lot of the time it's your adrenaline gets the best of you. I actually used to compete in karate, and I represented South Africa in karate. So I used to compete
Nice.
very actively in sports. So I know that when you go into a fight and someone wants to take your head off, immediately the adrenaline just keeps going, and people lose themselves and they don't perform because they're getting in their head, the adrenaline's taking over. How much has it helped you to be centered and present in the moment? Because that's something that you've got a lot of strength in regards to. Do you believe that was a super weapon of yours, not just in the challenges, but also the ability to connect with people and be present and actually not ask a question just for the sake of asking it, but actually taking in what somebody's telling you about their family or their kids at home, you know?
That's
I believe
right.
that's
No,
your
to me,
superpower.
I attribute everything I am today to that, to the spiritual work I've done, what I've gotten into. My life drastically changed very fast the moment I started learning about chakras, energy, all that kind of stuff. Love. It's all based on love and light, and that's everything for me. That is why I end up even being on the show. I believe.
Great. Now, Chantal, I'm going to move over to you in regards to Australian Survivor. When we look at South Africa's Survivor South Africa, they changed it from Australian Survivor to Survivor South Africa just to make it confusing and a bit of a tongue twister when you say them both in a row. When you look at the two seasons, I guess, and you look at the challenges, I think South Africa's Survivor is a lot closer to what we see in the US. There is some physical aspects to it, but there's a lot of puzzles and things like that. What do you think about Australian Survivor? Because I've got some strong opinions about what Australian Survivor does a bit differently, and I don't know if you've got those same opinions, but if you don't, I can go into some of the things that I've observed in the seasons that I've seen for Australian Survivor. What's your thoughts on Australian Survivor and how they do challenges differently, or is there anything that stands out around the challenges for you?
For me personally, challenges don't really stand out for me because I'm all about strategy and gameplay. So this is just a way to facilitate potential gameplay by shaking up people that have the power, or someone that doesn't have the power has an opportunity to gain some power within the game. So I don't really focus on the different challenges per se. I like the puzzle elements, but that's not really great TV. You know what? I'm a puzzle person. So I don't really notice anything specifically that stands out for me, unless it has to do with gameplay. The reward challenges, yeah, they can be kind of boring, but like you were mentioning, if it has an element where you have to decide who you're going to take with you, and maybe there's going to be a clue that's going to be on this reward, like it gets the wheels turning, and that's what I find interesting about Survivor and these platforms, reality TV, competitive shows, where you get to see gameplay happen, like behind the scenes of these challenges and these rewards or whatnot. So I can't really say I know, but
it's fine. It's fine. I'll forgive you, even though you podcast on a show called The Challenge. No, I'm just joking. Anyways, so when I look at Australian Survivor, for me, one of the things that stand out is the fact that it's a lot more physical than any of the US survivors, any of the South African survivors. It is super physical. Like, I mean, the courses that they have when they've got those tribal sort of challenges coming up, it looks like ninja warrior type courses where people have got to do monkey bars and they got to do some crazy athletic stuff that, a Letitia would have struggled to do some of those challenges. So it's interesting how they do that very differently. It definitely favors people like Rob, people like your Dantes in your season, or the Roccos, and the same for Australian Survivor. It actually favors those physically fit people early in the game. They change it up a little bit later in the season where it becomes more puzzles and a little bit of everything. But that's the thing that stands out for me the most. So I know a lot of people don't look at the challenges as something that keeps them very interested. And definitely I agree. The social dynamics and what happens from a social standpoint is the most important thing about Survivor. It is the whole reason why Rob won his season, is because he was so good at the social game. So 100% agree. But it is interesting sort of looking at the different shows and how different they are in regards to what they offer when it comes to challenges. Now, something else, Adam, that I wanted to come to you about is the locations that we see in Survivor. Now, Survivor US have been stuck in one place since season 33. It's Fiji. Fiji is beautiful. I've been there before. Beautiful island. island. The people are beautiful. I love island life, to be honest with you. I could definitely see myself just living on an island. I loved coconuts. I never had coconuts my whole life until the age of 23. And the first time I had a coconut, I was like, what is this thing? Because it never used to be that accessible in South Africa when I grew up. I've seen it there now when I've gone back for holidays and stuff like that, but I don't remember it as a kid seeing it in the stores in South Africa. And the first time I had coconut, I thought to myself, in my previous life, I must have been an islander. I love the life. I love the fact that you get really good, fresh food, the fish, being able to go out and do snorkeling and all that kind of stuff. But the one thing about, I guess, US Survivor for me is it's been stuck to this one location. Is that something that bothers you, or you've just thought to yourself, I'm happy to compromise on this because we get Survivor, so we won't complain?
Yeah, it didn't bother me as much at first when they sort of made the switch into keeping it all in Fiji because, I think for the first, I guess you could call it the first era of Survivor, I think that was what we looked forward to each season was, well, what cool location are they going to do next? And sometimes they would throw in an area where we, the masses, I guess, don't really know that much about, like Palau. I don't think many people had heard, or Vanuatu. I don't think people had heard of, countries like that before. But there was also a mix of countries that we did know a lot about. And it was interesting to see how Survivor incorporated their culture into the show. I'm thinking of places like China, Tocantins, which is Brazil, I believe. It's Tocantins. It sort of got a little bit, I don't want to say stale, that might be too extreme of a word, but it did get a little bit repetitive of, where are we going to go next? I think Survivor did a good job in like the US Survivor in the 20s did a good job of adapting to each season being less about, what new location are we going to showcase? And it became more about, what new twists are we going to add to the show, whether it's like the Blood versus Water, the Redemption Island, or sort of in the 30s, it became a bit of, what type of people are we going to pit against each other with the white collar, blue collar, no collar, and the millennials and Gen X. So I didn't mind the switch to Fiji. I still don't mind it too much now because, we sort of replaced where they're going to shoot next with sort of the who are we going to pit against each other, what sort of new advantage, like with Ghost Island, it really wasn't the pitting of two different types of people. It was the whole season was kind of centered around this new twist. Same thing with Edge of Extinction. I think obviously they use returning players a bit more in the new school era of Survivor. So I think that all these dynamics they're adding sort of allow people to look over the fact that it's the same beach and the same beaches, the same places they're doing rewards every single season. I do think this is going to get old eventually. I don't think we've reached the points. But it would be cool every now and again to say, Survivor. I think there's a lot of great places that have potential to be great Survivor locations that we just haven't seen yet. I want to see a cold weather season sometime.
Yeah, I think that would be very interesting. And I think there's a little bit of debate. There's a little bit of debate as to, I can see Rob is the only person who's been on the island before, just shaking his head there.
Yeah,
Rob, you've been called enough. No, I've heard Jeff and them talk about it before, where they've said when you strip everything away from someone and they just don't have that much clothes and they're forced to live and sleep outside, it makes it very, very difficult, I think, to do it in a cold weather place. So I appreciate it. I don't want to put Rob through it. I want to see him absolutely miserable and just crawl up in the fetal position for a whole season. We don't want to see that. We want to see some creative play. We want to see you be able to do what you do best when you're on the island. Now, for me, the locations isn't a really big thing either, but I did think, maybe it's something that we should mention there, with there being 7 seasons of South African Survivor and there being about 5 of the Australian Survivor, if we don't count the first 2 seasons that were in Channel 10. You've got great locations there like Panama, Malaysia, Mozambique, the Maldives, the Philippines, Samoa, and Fiji are all the locations that those seasons have taken place in. And I do think sometimes subconsciously it gets a little bit stale when you see the same backdrop in these shows. But for me personally, if I had to choose between every single season of Survivor being in Fiji and there being no season of Survivor, I'll take every season in Fiji. So I could get over that. It's not a biggie. But I do want to touch on the next thing that Adam sort of mentioned a little bit there, and it's in regards to twists. When we look at Survivor and specifically International Survivor Survivor. I think there's a lot of things that people don't know about the US Survivor, and the US Survivor potentially grabbing some twists from International Survivor as well. It hasn't always been Survivor, South Africa and Australian Survivor grabbing these twists from the US show. Twists that you may not know that were first used in International were the Idol Nullifier. It was called the Idol Canceller for the first time in the Australian season. So I think that was a pretty interesting twist that they brought in, but it was slightly different where the person had a super idol. They could either choose to play the idol or they could split it off to become an Idol Nullifier. So it was one sort of relic together that they could choose which one, but if they used one of them, the other one would become nullified. One of the things that we see in Survivor Winners at War, where we have all the best winners come back and play in season 40, is we see Adam get up and try and play an idol in Tribal, and people think he's crazy for thinking there's an idol in Tribal. Well, South African Survivor and Australian Survivor have had idols in Tribal, so it's not that crazy. And Adam is someone who does watch International Survivor. He loves International Survivor as well. So as a student of the game, he thought that Winners at War, they were going to up the game and that something like that was going to be in the actual show. One of the things that for me is very interesting about Survivor South Africa is that in the early seasons, there was this thing, and I don't know if it's still a part of Survivor South Africa, and it will be interesting to see if this ever does come back, but if someone got medevaced in the season, their torch would then be still in play because it was never extinguished. So the flame is not extinguished in the torch. It means their torch is still there. So the next person who gets voted out then automatically gets the person's torch who got medevaced, and they take their place in the game and joins the other tribe, which I thought was a very spiritual thing. If we think about fire on the island being life and the fire not being extinguished, so that gets passed on to someone else to carry the legacy on. And there's plenty more. I mean, I could go on and on about some of these twists that we see in International Survivor, but I do want to go to Rob about one that we saw on his season when at the final 11, instead of having one individual immunity, 4 people got individual immunity at final 11. How much did that mess up your game and your plans for what you wanted to do at that point? Because that's a lot of people to have individual immunity in one go.
Chris, you're making me relive trauma I've been trying to get over for a long time now.
I'm sorry for this. But I had to ask. I had to ask.
Yeah, look, it was a fantastic twist because it now forced us to look elsewhere. You kind of have the main people you want to go home. With that many idols around, even I worried a little bit now. Like, okay, wait, now the options are so limited at this stage. It's anyone's game right now. So it woke us up. It got us, which I think is great. It's nice. You must be able to think on your feet. You must be able to adapt. That's what survival is. You can't be stagnant and boring. You want to see things like that happening. So I welcomed it.
That's great. And again, I think that is so important when we see a lot of seasons where people do just have their tribe that they started with. And I think another thing that made your season really interesting is there was a lot of swaps. There were 3 different tribes, and people got, confused to the point where they got to the final 6 and then they realized, oh, we've got Saula, the 3 people from Saula still here, and they didn't realize who were the 3 original Sahulas versus who were the Sahulas later in the show because there were so many swaps happening. They just weren't there thinking about that. And it was mind-blowing that they didn't see it coming a mile away, but obviously we're the viewers, we see everything behind the scenes, we know what's going to happen. Now, the last part of this, and we really appreciate your time, we wanted to try and keep this close to an hour, is that I do want to go into a little bit of, if Survivor was ever to come back to you and call and say they want you to play again, would you play the show again? And would it have to be a special type of season? Because, I imagine that for someone like yourself playing the game again, you'll have a massive target on your back if you were to go back and play.
Yeah, that's why to me it's kind of why should I go back? Because it's if they thought for 2 seconds, the first thing they would do when they get there is say, let's get Rob out and then start playing. So it's going to be 10 times harder again, and I don't know what's the point of that. I'd rather look.
Okay, let me pitch it for you. Let me pitch it for you here, Rob. Okay. I'm Jeff Probst, giving you a call. I'm Rob Bentele. We're gathering together the best of the best US survivors to ever play the game. And we're going to get the best of the best international survivors to ever play the game. Are you there for an international versus US survivor season?
International, yes, we are doing international. No question. I would leave tomorrow.
Great. That's what I want to hear now.
I want the Americans and I want the Australians.
Yeah, I think it'll be brilliant. We should make it 3 tribes. So you got the South African, the Australian, and the American tribe. And definitely at some point you got to do the split and get people to work together, because we don't want to see that the whole season. But I think that could be a very interesting season if we get all 3 tribes out there playing each other. Now, the next question for you is, I know who your ride or dies were in your own season, but who would you want to see out there with you fighting the good fight for South Africa, if you were to call? Like, who would be your I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here, obviously, but if you were to select one guy and one girl to come there and help out, who would those be? And if you want to give some honorable mentions, that's okay. I understand you need to do the political thing as well.
Yeah, look, I always say to everyone that asks me, I could not have done what I did on that island had it not been for Nicole. We are just a team. We work together like that. So I would pick her in a heartbeat. Let's go smash this. And to be honest with you, Nicole would be all I need. But as far as a male as well, any season,
Any season.
Season South African. I love how Vanna played. I won't lie. He played a phenomenal game too, season 6. He would be a great asset there as well, because his social game is fantastic, physical game good. Yeah, so I'll take Nicole and Vanna.
Okay, make my job a little bit easier, because I'm going to add to that team, and I'm going to add 2 more people there as well. And I was going to add Vanner definitely as one of the people, but I was very close between Vanner and Jacques, and I want to see Jacques come back. I want to see him prove himself. I'm a big fan of the fact that he went out there and played with his heart out there, and he left it all out on the field, and he did some crazy things from the bottom, which I'd love to see again. And I think you're going to need someone like that can think a couple of steps ahead when you're going up against the US, especially if you look at how far the US season is, season 40. He's seen a lot probably that maybe the rest haven't seen. And then the one person,
between him and Vanna, he's a good option.
Very for me as well. Those are the 2 people. So I'm glad you picked Vanna, because it was going to be one of those 2. So together we're going to put a great team out there for you to go and play this game with. Now, the last person that I would love to see come back and play, I think she's an absolute beast of an athlete. And for me, I love her personality and her straightforwardness. Is Steffi. I want to see Steffi back out there. I really, really enjoyed her on the season, and I think she's a great cast member. And I think the US would love to see someone like that. She would do well in a show like the Challenge as well. Now, that's the other thing I did want to ask you before I go over to Chantel. The Challenge comes calling. Would you be interested in playing the Challenge? And have you seen any of the Challenge episodes, or have you just sort of been in the know-how of what the show's about?
Just curious, do you have any inside information yet?
I've got 0 inside information, but I did see a little bit of a post go up not that long ago, that somebody asked you the question, would you play the Challenge? And you said it's a very good question. So I thought I would ask the same question and piggyback off it. So I don't know if you want to leave us with it's a very good question or anything more, but just to know if that's something.
Be very careful here. You do know that if something like this was happening, right now, I would not be able to talk about it, and so
100%.
I can't talk about it. But there's also a bit of a problem currently with South Africa. We've got a special travel restriction. A lot of countries in the world have banned South Africans from coming in because we've got a special strain of COVID. So yeah, that's all I can actually say at the moment about when it regards to the Challenge. But I would love to play the Challenge, 100%. No question about it. I would.
Have you seen any of it?
Yes, I have. I've started watching it a few weeks back now.
Oh, great. I think you'll do great at it. I think that it will play to your strengths of just being a physical beast yourself and having done really well in those individual immunity challenges. I think you'll do really well on the Challenge. And if you hypothetically ever did play a season of the Challenge, I'll be shouting for you, because it would be great to have a South African on the show to represent. So I do hope you do get that call. Now I'm going to go over to Chantel. And Chantel, I want to ask you about Australian Survivor. Now, if we were to pick a female and a male to join the cast of International versus US Survivor, who would you want to see on that boat or getting the call to go and play the show?
I couldn't really pick one of each. So out of the men, I would like to see Luke, AK, Nick Iadanza, and Harry. And out of the women, I put Shawnee and Phoebe. those are the people that stood out for me. I feel like I most recently saw the All-Star season. So, there are people who play. There were so many people that I loved, and I didn't feel like they got to play the game like that they should have played. So I would like to see them come back for a little bit redemption, because I thought that Shawnee especially was playing a really, really good game at the end, and she just was up against.
I love Shawnee. Yeah.
This wasn't going to happen.
So I'm going to add one person, because you pretty much chose everybody there that I would want to see in it, but you did miss out, in my opinion, the challenge beast of Australian Survivor. And in fact, she does have the record, and she's equal on the record with Rob for 5 individual immunity challenges. Brooke Jolett. How can you not have Brooke come back and play and represent Australia? Because she's an absolute beast at challenges. Great physical and social player. And it would be a nice eye candy for you, Rob, to have on the beach there as well. She's not bad looking either.
I would love that. Is she single? Is she single? Because, they threw me on an island full of women who are married and have boyfriends. I was so let down.
The challenge is maybe for you then, Rob. There'll definitely be something for you there when you go into the challenge. They love their romances, and they definitely cast very carefully to have those type of things happen on those show. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this. And one, I guess, last one before we go to Adam to give us a couple of US survivors here he'd like to see in a season like that. One other sort of shout out I want to make. It's not from Survivor South Africa or from the Australian Survivor, but it's from Survivor Turkey. I want to see Turbo come back and play the challenge again. And Turbo is a 2 times Survivor winner, similar to Tony and to Sandra. So it takes a lot to win the show twice. And then he came on the challenge and won the challenge once as well. So I'd love to see him come back, because he's an absolute beast. So I'd love to see him in an international versus US Survivor. Throw him in as a wild card in there with you guys, and he could be in either one of the teams. I don't care where he lands. Now, Adam, we're going to go to you for the US. Who would you like to see in a season like this? If you, I guess, try and stick to one male and one female if you can. I know there's a lot that you're friends with and you're close with, but if you can add one male and one female, who would it be?
It's a tough one. I didn't have anyone prepared, so I'm winging this on the spot. So I'm sure might change my answer as soon as this podcast ends. And I think after seeing Winners at War, I might avoid some of the old school names. Like, I think the names that pop into people's heads more immediately are like, your Boston Robs, your Parvati's. But I don't, I think after seeing Winners at War, how poorly those guys adapted to this new wave of how Survivor is being played, which I'm assuming is somewhat similar in South Africa and Australia. I would probably lean more towards new school players. And because he is such a fan of the international shows, I think I would love to see Adam Klein out there to represent, and just the intensity he brings to the game. It's funny because even though he, and we were just talking about this last night on another podcast, even though he won his first season and didn't even make was either the merge boot or around that time on Winners at War, I actually respected and enjoyed watching his game on Winners at War more. It was just so interesting seeing this kind of like more low-key player just really go all out and show his passion for the show. So I pick Adam as a male. As a female, I know she didn't do that well in Winners at War. Kim and Sarah, I'm kind of debating between those two because they're different games. And what's interesting about Sarah Lucina is that she, I think, has adapted to all the twists and nullifiers and steal a votes and legacy advantage. I think she, more than anyone, has taken advantage and really come the closest to mastering, because with all these new twists and fire tokens and everything, I feel like more times than not we see people use them improperly and them sort of not living up to what they were expected to be. Sarah in Game Changers, I think, has sort of worked around the idols, all the new stuff, all the new twists and turns better than anyone. So I'd probably lean toward Sarah and Adam if I had to pick two.
Okay, so I'll add one US and one, and Chantal, if you want to add one as well afterwards, I know you're also a US fan, and definitely even for you, Rob, if there's anyone you want to see, just have a think about it. But one I want to see is Dominique Abatie. I want to see him come back. I think that he would be a great addition to the show. We've seen Wendell come back. We saw how he did on Winners. And I still think Wendell's a great player, but I think Dom would be interesting to see how he would go. He's the only winner, just in case you haven't seen this, Rob, is the only player to go. He lost. He got second place in the season on a draw vote. So the vote was a draw at the final. The votes got read at the final tribal council instead of going to the US. And then the person who was third became the last vote. And she had the vote because she had no vote. So it was 5-5, and she had to vote for the winner. And she was very close to both of them. And I want to see her come back as well to play. What's the name again, Adam? I forgot her name for some reason at the moment. But I want to see her and Dom come back as a duo in that international season because she had to vote against them. I think it'll make for some interesting drama. And I also do like the fact that you're saying Adam, because I think Adam and Jack are very similar type of players. So that would be interesting to see them go up against each other in a season such as that. Rob, do you have anybody from the US that you would like to see play the show? Maybe an idol, maybe someone you looked up to for some of those early seasons.
With the US, for me, it was always just Boston Rob. And unfortunately, I didn't watch the US as much as I should have. But yeah, Boston Rob, to me, he's who inspired me to become South African Rob. And I'd love to actually
the original
play with him
Godfather.
one day. Yeah, I would love to actually be blessed enough to play with him one day. And to be honest with you, just this international season, it's something that I've dreamt about nonstop as well. I think a lot of people in the Survivor community want to see this happen, and I don't understand why they don't do it. It would be amazing.
It goes into asking the question of which one of the three international shows are the most likely to do an international Survivor. And I think Survivor South Africa would do it. I think that Nico and Leroux Butta and those guys, they're big enough fans to do a season like that. But I don't think that we would potentially be able to afford the production unless you've got these other shows adding to it as well. And these guys are used to playing for $1 million US, and they're used to playing for 500,000 Australian dollars. So it depends on if it's about the money or not. And that does make a difference. I think the biggest likelihood for me personally is that Australian Survivor might do something like that because they are owned by CBS. The contractual issues with players that have played in CBS would be null and void. We've seen a US player, Russell Hance, play in Australian Survivor. So they've already done that once before in the past. So and also they now have, and I don't know if you're aware of this, Rob, but Your Beautiful Face is on the show at the moment in Channel 10. They are showing it in Australia. Survivor South Africa is actually showing in Channel 10. And they have got all of the Survivor South African seasons, all of the Australian Survivor seasons, and all of the US seasons there. So they've got fans for all three of the franchises. You've got fans in Australia. You might be recognized if you ever do come over to watch a game, on this side of the world. You might think you'd get away from it, but it's not so easy. So Chantel, is there anyone that you wanted to add that you would like to see, I guess, from the US side that we didn't mention?
Biased because they were just on the challenge, but Natalie Anderson, she really adapted really well to coming onto the challenge, and she was really good at Winners at War, even though she was spoiler alert voted out first. She still was able to last and make it to the final tribal. She has a pretty amazing game considering how she played in Winners at War, and then even up until she had to leave the challenge, I thought she was doing really well. She was adapting to the strategy. She was knowing who to talk to kind of understand how to play the challenge, which is a different game than Survivor. So I would like to see how she would fare again with other people from around the world, because I do think she has a really good Survivor game, and I would be very interested to see how she plays with other people.
Great. Now, this is basically the end of the show, but we do want to thank everybody for watching today. If you liked it, click on the little bell to get any notifications. There's a lot of content coming your way. We've got Chantel starting her Big Brother Canada content that's going to start from tomorrow, I believe. I get it confused with the different time zones. I am starting to do a rewatch of Australian Survivor Season 5, I believe, Champions and Contenders 2. So that is the one that David and Luke Toki and those guys played in that Rob mentioned earlier. We're going to be doing all the episodes on that and talking about it. And then after that, I believe I saw something about Rob he might be off the grid during this time, but we're going to have mid-April. We're starting Rob's season and we're watching all of that as well. And we've already got 2 potential castaways from your season, Rob, that will come on and have a bit of a chat with us. We won't say it up here now. We don't want to put pressure on them, but it's looking good that they will come on and have a conversation with us. And Rob, if you're ever interested in the future to have a little bit more of a deep dive, I would love to sit down and even have a bit more of a conversation about your experience specifically in the show. I know this one was quite broad today, talking about International Survivor and everything that's going along with that. I also want to give you an opportunity, Rob, if there's any projects or anything that you're doing at the moment and you want to give a bit of a shout out or bring awareness to what you're doing, please, this is your opportunity. If there's anything you want people to follow you on Instagram or anything that you're doing, let our viewers know.
Yeah, look, there is a project that I've been very passionate about. I'm not sure if you know, in South Africa, we've got a huge problem with gender-based violence. And I've been working behind the scenes the last 8 months with the South African government to launch a platform that will eradicate that. But it's obviously still to say exactly what it is and everything, but that is what you can expect from me. It's my passion. I want to try and change the country safety-wise for the better for all of us.
That's a great cause to get behind, and definitely one that I think we need ambassadors and people like yourself that are public figures and have got a following to stand up and be a voice in a country that so desperately needs it. So I thank you for doing some of that good work, and I'll be following very closely to see when you put anything up on Instagram or any of your social media platforms to see what you're doing there. Adam, what do you have coming up in the next week or so?
Yeah, so me and Gideon on our Survivor Buffs podcast, we're going to be interviewing Eager Turtle from YouTube to kind of go over one by one all the contestants from Winners at War and kind of talk about their legacy, if we're ever going to see them back, sort of like the future for some of those contestants. And we got some interviews with some Survivor contestants coming up soon. I believe we're interviewing T-Bird from Africa today.
Nice. And Chantal, is there anything else you wanted to plug as well? I know we did the Big Brother. Anything about the challenge and what you're doing on your channel at the moment that you want to make people aware of?
YouTube channel, Reality Realness with 3 S's, where we are doing coverage of the challenge season 36. So we do that live after the episode on Wednesdays. And then I'm also doing on Thursdays, UK's Drag Race. So that's something that we do usually around 10 or 11 at night on Thursdays. That's Eastern Standard Time.
All right. Thanks, guys. It's been great. Catch you next time. And if you do like the content, like I said, please subscribe and follow us for more similar content in the near future.